Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really special review for you guys from the brand Oak and Oscar. A little about them: they were founded back in 2015. They are US based and they're enthusiast run. They focus on small batch releases of original minimalist aesthetic sports watches. In terms of type of watches, a chronograph, some key characteristics when you're looking for a chrono. Of course, you're going to find external pushers to activate timing functions, multiple subdials to measure elapsed time, often featuring additional scales dependent on the subgenre. This is their newest release, known as the Atwood in the white Panda colorway. The Atwood is a 39mm manually wound flyback chronograph with a blued column wheel and 58-hour power reserve. Its slim profile, combined with a theme of clean crispiness, even carries over to the pusher action, featuring an Oak and Oscar fine-tuned experience, enhanced, locally by the brand. So this thing is pretty sweet, and I know Oak and Oscar is definitely a brand that's out there, but doesn't necessarily get a lot of coverage, and that's because typically it's just owners out there. There's not a lot of review pieces that are floating around. This was actually kindly lent in by Chase, and this is his personal watch, the founder. This is his watch, and I'm getting to handle it before he does, which I think was really, really cool. So big shout out to Chase. Thanks so much. And with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Whew, okay guys, what a beauty. And of course, I'm a sucker for the Panda dial aesthetic, but this one just hit such a sweet spot. Typically like, an Oak and Oscar fashion here. Again, very minimalist, very distilled, very far from busy. I mean, even for a chronograph, typically chronographs can be pretty busy by nature, but somehow they found a way to really just smooth this thing out. And I have to say, it's gorgeous. It's just completely slick. I mean, it's clean, crispy, guys. Getting into the price point, these go for $26.50 on bracelet or $24.50 on their Horween leather straps. And then, of course, they do include a complimentary NATO with either option. This has a 39mm diameter. It's only 12.8 millimeters thick there, and you guys can see. And I think this might be a little bit deceiving for you to see this and think, oh, well, it looks kind of, it looks kind of thick. I will say the proportions wise, because the mid case, although the mid case is actually quite thin, that the bezel protrusion essentially just, I think, makes it look a little bit visually thick. But if you were to see this in person, I think you would understand that, again, at just 12.8, under 13 millimeters thick, that's actually quite thin. And of course, they do have to accommodate the hand stack there and everything like that and get clearance. And you do have a very mild dome on this sapphire crystal. So I will say that this wears really, really well. And I know that can be a sticking point for many people that are looking for mechanical chronographs. So yeah, this is one of the smaller, thinner, better wearing ones that actually does have really beautiful visual proportions. Now, in terms of that crystal, it's actually double domed, which is nice. So it's going to see, you guys are going to notice that it is very, very legible from that perspective. It does have a multi-layer anti-reflective treatment on the underside of the crystal, which is fantastic. It does have a very nice crown action here. It's not screw down, it's push pull. But it's also because it's a manually wound watch. This actually has the mechanical Sellita AMT 5100M, and check it out if I can get it to focus there. Let's see. All right, check that out. So this movement is pretty awesome. It's actually basically an up-spec SW510, so that's the base of it, but essentially they add that flyback column wheel upgrade, which is great. So It has a 58-hour power reserve and beats at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate. And this thing's awesome. So what do I mean by flyback? So let's see. Essentially, when you let it go, right, that's typical for a chrono. Ooh, man, that action was really smooth. Ooh. So typically you get the action going, you start it, you stop it, right? You flip it back. So here's the cool thing. So this is what it means to have a flyback chronograph. So you're timing it and you need to go back. It just keeps going. So you can't do that with any old chronograph. Again, normally you start it, you stop it, you reset it. Here, you can have it running. And then again, of course, this is something that is very specific in terms of the use case where you would need a flyback, where you're going to be timing something and then you're going to just keep timing it, right? You don't want to start, stop, lose time in between as you're timing it. So that is a really, really cool feature. And again, it's something that's typically in much more expensive watches. I mean, this movement, I think I've only seen it in hand hearts before, and those are pretty cool, not cheap German chronographs with a ton of heritage, right? And this one actually, the cool thing is they didn't just settle for this really awesome premium upgraded movement. They actually did some fine tuning as well. And I have to say, the action on these pushers is fantastic. It's very, very smooth. Not jumpy at all. It just feels very, very dialed in. So kudos to Oak and Oscar for the extra work that they put in. Now, in terms of the case back, you guys can see it is actually a display case back here. Let me pop this open. This is obviously a brand new watch. It's a little stiff here, so it's a bit of a nail breaker. So what I try to do is grab it from the sides to pop it open. That doesn't always work though. It's probably not going to work while I'm reaching around a tripod. So I'll just try to do this. Okay, again, it's not my watch, so I do want to be very kind to it and considerate of it. So you can see here, flip lock style, fully milled there on the folding section, and you even do get this very cool toolless micro adjust system that actually uses ceramic detent balls, as you guys can see there. So that's a really nice high-end touch. And I did skip a little forward there. So 6 positions of toolless micro adjust, but I opened up the clasp so you guys can get a look at this movement. Check it out. Let me just get it in the light here, kind of get the bracelet out of the way, get the touch focus. All right, there we go. Check that out. Sorry if there's a little smudginess from my fingers, but you can see beautifully done. Again, a column wheel chronograph and a flyback. So these are not features you will find typically in lesser expensive chronographs, and that is just awesome to find that here. Let me see, make sure. Okay, so if we were to, there we go. Very cool. So, as you guys can see, very, very nice from that perspective. Now, getting into the dial, which, you know, is a bit of the actual magic I think is associated with Oak and Oscar, which is going to be their visual design language. Well, you know what? Let's just a little bit of visual interest. We'll let that chrono seconds run. You're getting this beautiful matte white sandwich dial with black subdials. You're getting painted hands so you can get that really maximum contrast. This is going to be using BGW9 Lumen with a white dial. They have actually done some really interesting things with the Lume, right? With a sandwich dial, of course, it's blacked out. That's how you get the contrast and the visibility. So when you get into the darker situations, they get really fun and creative when it comes to the Lume, and I'm looking forward to showing that to you guys here in a bit. This also does have 5 atmospheres or 50 meters of water resistance, which I think is completely fine. It's not the best. I think 100 meters would have been better. But also that means, thicker seals and everything like that. So to keep this thing thin, to have that display case back to showcase that really awesome thin and high-end movement, I think was a smart choice. Now, the lugs on here are 20 millimeters. You have a solid end link, female end link, solid link, screw pin construction. This thing's gorgeous, and it's very minimalist and very tool-like. So for those of you that feel like a lot of these, bigger brands have kind of lost their way and kind of went away from what made them great, I think Oak and Oscar is an awesome brand for you, especially if you understand kind of the costs associated with something that is built to this precision, but not necessarily showcasing a bunch of complex finishes, right? So making it more complex or versus simple does, it can increase cost, but that doesn't mean that making it simple is cheap or easy, especially when it's something to where the simplicity, but the tolerances are fantastic on this piece, guys. And really just like any other Oak and Oscar, you can see fully articulated, so really smartly done in terms of the shape of each link. So that means that you're going to have really great comfortability on wrist, as well as taking it on and off the wrist. You're going to get this to really conform a lot easier, and that's something that I appreciate very, very much. So again, 20 millimeter lugs. These are drilled as well, so this is going to be a real strap monster, but I think this really shines on this bracelet. It's just kind of a perfect tool watch with a beautiful aesthetic. I mean, the orange, the Panda layout, it's black with maybe, depending on the lighting, you can feel senses of touches of a little bit of a charcoal or anthracite, but it's a clearly very nice high contrast setup, and I dig it. Very clean. So with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5 inch wrist, this wears just about perfectly. Check that out. Absolutely gorgeous. And again, this is a chronograph, and somehow it just has a beautiful profile. Check that out. Very, very nice. Whew. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to get a fair amount of perspective distortion, and it's going to make the watch seem a lot larger than it actually is. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame here so that you guys can get, still a detailed look, but just out of a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And you guys can see beautifully contoured here. Again, there's not a lot of complexity in terms of that finishing, but it also means that the level of satinization and of course the milling, it has to be up to spec, because you're not going to be distracted by a bunch of fancy beveling work. And I like that they just keep it very clean, very minimal. And another nice thing is, look at that crown. It's actually a satin finish there, not a brushed finish, but like a matte satin, and I think it looks really, really cool. And of course, the tactile engagement is fantastic in terms of winding the crown, and you're going to want that, especially in a manual wind movement. So, ooh. Yes, this has got to be one of the best looking Pandas that's been released in recent history. And the nice thing is, you're not worried about a weird date integration. You're not worried about, anything that's oversized or hyper specific in terms of like vintage rally motocross type of stuff, or, regatta timing and a bunch of extra weird scales or anything like that. Like here, it's just very clean, very simple, and to the point. You do have, of course, your tachymeter there, but it's on that inner space, on that sloped chapter ring. And yeah, this thing just looks really good. Again, the design combined with the level of execution is always very, very impressive when it comes to Oak and Oscar. Oof. Guys, this is just... it's a good looking watch, and it feels good on the wrist. And again, guys, I'm somebody who has some pretty thick chronographs that I've grown to love over the years. And yeah, the thinness on here Even though I think visually it still looks quite balanced, it doesn't appear as ultra thin. I think the wearing experience in terms of how low the center of gravity is on this case feels very low slung. It feels like it's hugging the wrist really well. Although maybe you're not getting that visually from this as you're watching the video. I will say in person, the experience definitely checks the boxes in terms of comfortable wear profile. So with that said, let's actually get this off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, I told you guys they got really smart with the Lume. Check that out. You get that beautiful little strip of luminescence with all the little increments there, so you can absolutely still be able to tell the time. But of course, you're not always going to be in a pitch dark or also a super well lit environment. A lot of times you're going to be coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, you're just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice with these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. So maybe include a bit of transitional lighting so that, yeah, you guys can see here that, of course, the trade-off you get for absolute pitch black legibility, you're going to get tons of legibility in pretty much any other lighting situation because you're going to have that sandwich dial providing a ton of contrast there, and then you're going to get pops of orange as well. So really, really nice. I just dig how smart they were with this Lume. Every time Oak and Oscar do a white dial, they always have a trick up their sleeve when it comes to the Lume, and that's across all models, so that's nothing that's unique to this one. But I think it's just really, really cool. I think they could have easily done what probably most folks would have done, which is apply some type of black Lume, which is going to be terrible in the black section there, so it would just be there as more of a check in the box. Hey, well, we added Lume, and yeah, not great Lume, but it had to be black Lume, right? Instead, I think that's just really cool that they said, oh, we're just almost gonna have like an Easter egg of Lume there. That's going to be great Lume, right? That actually matches the handset quite beautifully. I mean, of course, it'd be nice if there was a little way to tell maybe the 12 o'clock orientation at a glance. But of course, if this is on your wrist, you're going to know where 12 o'clock is just because you know your wrist and your hand and you're oriented with the human body. But if this was out on the dresser, you know, it would be nice to have some level of that cardinal recognition. But again, that is a trade-off in terms of the purity and aesthetic. Here is just I think completely worth it. So that's just watches can't be everything to all people, and this is, to me though, this is just really, really well done. I dig it a whole lot, guys. So with that said, all right, closing thoughts on the wrist. Great proportions, super, super comfy, especially for a mechanical chronograph. You guys won't hear me say, I mean, a mechanical chronograph on a bracelet. That's not common, guys, in terms of that also equating to something that is very comfortable. So yeah, it's perfectly balanced both visually and physically. So the visual weight is balanced beautifully, and the actual physical heft is balanced really, really well. In terms of model variants, there's the white Panda dial as seen here. There's a navy reverse Panda as well as a charcoal reverse Panda. So you're going to have a couple different options. They're all going to be super, super versatile. I think the white, of course, is going to be the most iconic. You know, we all love a good Panda dial, but I think if you want to go something that's going to be maybe more specific to Oak and Oscar, you know, the navy would be really great, as well as a charcoal. I think those are both fantastic other options. The white, I mean, the fact that Chase chose the white probably says a lot, right? In terms of just the clean crispiness and this, how this is a very much a pinnacle example of Oak and Oscar and their design ethos. Now, in terms of comparable models, you know, the price point does have overlap with other higher end micro brands, as well as mainstream offers, right? So it's like it crosses over into both places just because typically, mechanical chronographs aren't going to be cheap, let alone manual wind mechanical chronographs, let alone manual wind mechanical chronographs with a movement that has a flyback and a column wheel, a blued column wheel that's doing extra work to really fine tune that pusher engagement experience and all of the tactile points of action. So, that's something where there's going to be other competitors, right? But there's also a certain X factor here that, you just don't really see it very often, even, regardless of the price point. Yes, this is a watch that by certain standards is expensive, right? From the eye of somebody who collects typically independent microbrands. This is going to be a more expensive independent microbrand. But for somebody who collects more mid-tier and luxury watches, this is a quite affordable watch considering what you're getting. So yeah, there's obviously going to be a bit of a juxtaposition there. They're going to be playing off of each other. It depends on where you are within your journey, how you're going to look at this watch. Some of you might look at it as a attainable grail. Some of you might look at this and say, oh, this is like an amazing wearable kind of everyday option to one of my more expensive luxury timepieces. So I think that's the fun thing about Oak and Oscar as a brand, is that they kind of are able to straddle that with real finesse in terms of their place within the market. So for me, guys, bottom line, like any Oak and Oscar watch, the Atwood is a clean an uncluttered piece, a handsome distilled take on the classic Panda dial chronograph with an aesthetic that beautifully straddles both vintage and contemporary design cues, built to a tolerance and execution that clearly reads as a functional tool watch. Oak and Oscar operate in a space many other aspiring microbrands hope to eventually break into, a premium market supported by enthusiasts of multifaceted interests, converging on, an appreciation of quality and fine design. So I think that's what's really special about the Oak and Oscar brand, right? I think a lot of brands have really cool models, but they don't necessarily have a fully fleshed out brand. And one of the things I really appreciate about Oak and Oscar is that they have that. They have a brand. They also have really cool models, right? Like they have cool products. But as a brand, you understand Oak and Oscar a little bit more because they put that forward. They put the effort into the branding, in terms of the experience, and they do a great job, I think, of refining and really targeting what they're going for, right? Especially with something that can be interpreted in many ways, right? When you think minimalist, you think very stripped down, but this is a very particular type of minimalism, right? And again, there's classic design cues, but it feels very contemporary and modern at the same time. So, this just fits so many different types of situations and aesthetics and styles. So I don't know, there's something that's really attractive about this watch. And even apart from the fact that yes, it's extremely well spec'd, it has an amazing movement in it, it's hyper capable, but yeah, then you wrap that in this just beautifully, they could have just got by on the design alone and put like a regular SW510 movement in here, and probably charged around the same price, and it would have been fine, right? Because this looks so great. But the fact that they went above and beyond, they up-spec the movement, and then they even refined it further in-house, I don't know, that just says a lot, and I can appreciate that. So another big shout out to Chase. Guys, I'll get this wrapped up. This needs to get back to him so we can get on his wrist. But let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.